the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry. In the early 1990s, hip-hop was getting popular across the country, but it wasn't one united culture. Rappers on the East Coast, especially in New York, saw themselves as the birthplace of hip-hop and believed they set the standard for lyricism and authenticity. At the same time, the West Coast, led by Los Angeles, was making its own mark with gangsta rap, telling street stories that connected with millions of listeners. At first, it was just healthy competition and a fight for respect and dominance on the charts. But soon, record labels and magazines made things a lot worse. The Source and Vibe started framing it as East versus West, making it seem like the success of one side meant the failure of the other. Labels like Death Row on the West and Bad Boy on the East were placed at the forefront of the rivalry, and rappers who were signed to them often found themselves dragged into the conflict whether they wanted it or not. Things turned violent after Tupac Shakur was shot in 1994 at a New York recording studio. Tupac openly accused Biggie Smalls and Sean Puffy Combs of being involved or at least knowing something about it. Biggie denied it, but the damage was already done. Tupac signed to Death Row Records while Biggie was Bad Boy's star. And suddenly the rivalry wasn't just about who had the better rhymes. It became personal, with songs like Hit 'Em Up, where Tupac went after Biggie directly, and with Biggie releasing Who Shot Ya, which Tupac believed was aimed at him. Behind the music, gangs, entourages, and industry figures were stoking the fire even more, using rappers as the face of battles that were just as much about money and power as they were about pride. That's not even all. Fans took sides, arguments broke out at clubs and concerts, and what had once been competition for respect became a dangerous situation where lives were on the line. In 1996, the competition had become deadly. Tupac was shot multiple times in Las Vegas after a Mike Tyson fight, and he died a few days later at only 25 years old. Just 6 months later, in March 1997, Biggie was gunned down in Los Angeles at 24. The two biggest rappers of their time, both gone before they even hit their prime, all because of a rivalry that spiraled out of control. Suge Knight's ruined Death Row Records. In the 1990s, Death Row Records was basically on top of the world. It had Dr. Dre fresh off The Chronic, Snoop Dogg dropping Doggy Style, and later Tupac with All Eyes on Me. The label became the core of West Coast hip-hop, selling millions of records and influencing the entire sound of rap at the time. On paper, Death Row looked unstoppable, like it was building an empire that could last for decades. But behind the scenes, Suge Knight, the co-founder and CEO, was running things with fear instead of business sense. He was known for intimidating people, from artists to executives, and stories spread about him threatening rivals, dangling people off balconies, and bringing gang members into label meetings. As his money kept coming in and his fame grew, well, so did his problems. Suge constantly faced lawsuits for violence, shady deals, and unpaid royalties, which pushed artists away. Dr. Dre, the genius behind the beats, left the label after clashing with Suge and launched Aftermath, where he later discovered Eminem and 50 Cent. Snoop Dogg, who had once been the label's golden child, also left after feeling trapped under Suge's control. Tupac's death in 1996 was another problem for him, because he was not only Death Row's biggest star, but also the one keeping the label in the spotlight. Without Dre, without Snoop, and with Tupac gone, the roster quickly lost its shine. By the late 90s, the empire that had looked unstoppable was crumbling fast. Suge himself couldn't stay out of trouble. In 1997, he was sent to prison for parole violations, and while he was locked up, Death Row fell apart even faster. More lawsuits piled up, the money dried up, and artists didn't want to be associated with the chaos. By the 2000s, Death Row went bankrupt, and its catalog was sold off piece by piece. What had once been the most feared and successful label in rap got destroyed by power, violence, and ego. Tupac Shakur's murder. In September 1996, Tupac Shakur was at the very peak of his career. He had just released All Eyes on Me, was starring in movies, and was basically the face of West Coast rap. But on the night of September 7th, after leaving a Mike Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas, his life took a very shocking turn. Tupac and Suge Knight got into a fight with a man named Orlando Anderson inside the MGM Grand Hotel. Hours later, as Tupac rode in Suge's car down the Las Vegas Strip, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside them and opened fire. Tupac was hit multiple times. Suge, despite being grazed, managed to drive the car away. But 6 days later, Tupac died in the hospital at just 25 years old. The news absolutely shocked everyone, even though he had already talked about death in his music. Songs like Hail Mary and If I Die Tonight felt like predictions once fans listened again after his death. He had lived in constant paranoia, always looking over his shoulder, and even rapped about not expecting to live long, but nobody thought it would actually happen so suddenly. The mystery only got worse when no one was arrested right away. Orlando Anderson, the man Tupac had fought earlier that night, was questioned but never charged, and years of speculation followed. Rumors tied his death to gang rivalries, East Coast-West Coast beef, or even conspiracies involving the government or Suge Knight himself. For fans, the lack of justice made the loss even harder to take, leaving a wound in hip-hop that never healed. Tupac's murder left West Coast rap leaderless. He was the driving force of Death Row Records, the loudest voice in the feud with the East Coast, and a representation of young black ambition and struggle. With him gone, the label's power started slipping fast, and artists who had once fed off his energy struggled to fill the gap. The paranoia his death created spread across the industry, and rappers started moving differently. Beefs were taken more seriously, and the fear of violent endings became part of the culture. To this day, Tupac's murder is still officially unsolved. The notorious B.I.G.'s murder. Just 6 months after Tupac's death, tragedy struck the other side of the country. On March 9, 1997, the notorious B.I.G., also known as Biggie Smalls, was killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. He had flown in from New York for a promotional event and was leaving a party hosted by Vibe magazine when the attack happened. Around 12:30 a.m., as Biggie sat in the passenger seat of a GMC Suburban, a black Chevy Impala pulled up alongside him at a red light and opened fire. 4 bullets hit him, and he died shortly after at just 24 years old. The shocking part was how similar it was to Tupac's murder. Another drive-by, another superstar gone too young, and another case where no one was brought to justice. For fans, it felt like hip-hop itself was under attack. Besides hitting fans hard, Biggie's death also changed the entire East Coast rap industry. He had been the face of Bad Boy Records, with Puffy, now Diddy, building an empire of talent. With albums like Ready to Die and Life After Death, Biggie had proven himself as one of the greatest storytellers in rap, combining street style with commercial success. When he died, that voice was silenced, and the balance of power in rap shifted. East Coast rap lost its most important star just as West Coast rap had lost Tupac, leaving a vacuum that no one else could immediately fill. The murders of both Tupac and Biggie ended the golden era of the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry by force, leaving scars that still define rap history, and the industry never recovered the same way. After Biggie's death, Bad Boy Records struggled to maintain its dominance, and New York rap was left searching for its next leader. Meanwhile, fans and the media endlessly speculated about whether Tupac and Biggie's murders were connected. Theories linked both deaths to gang fights, label wars, and even corrupt police officers, but no official answers ever came. What made Biggie's murder particularly painful was that he had just finished recording Life After Death, which was released weeks later and became one of the most celebrated rap albums ever. Hearing his voice dominate the charts after his death was bittersweet, because fans were reminded of how much was lost in just 6 months. 50 Cent's shifting focus from art to beef. When 50 Cent got into the rap game in 2003, he seemed unstoppable. His first album, Get Rich or Die Tryin', sold millions, and almost every track was playing on the radio or in the clubs. He had that peak street story too. Being shot 9 times gave him an image that no one else could match. But while most rappers would have kept building on that momentum through more music, 50 started putting just as much energy into destroying other rappers' careers. For starters, his feud with Ja Rule became one of the biggest takedowns in rap history. He made so many diss tracks, interviews, and even videos mocking Ja that people stopped taking Ja Rule seriously. At that point, fans weren't just listening to the music anymore. They were watching 50 tear his enemies apart. And for a while, that's what made him the most exciting celebrity in hip-hop. But after Ja Rule, 50 didn't stop. He went at Fat Joe, The Game, and even took shots at Jay-Z. Every beef became part of his brand, and he dragged his G-Unit crew into the mix too, turning his circle into a machine for making enemies. Rap used to be about who had the best rhymes and who could make the best albums. But with 50, that wasn't it at all. Headlines about fights and beefs became just as important as what was on his records, so fans started to expect it. Every time he dropped a new song, they wanted to know who he was coming after next. For 50, conflict became the whole strategy. He turned rap into a business where drama sold records just as much as music did. But the cost was that people began paying less attention to the actual songs. His later albums didn't have the same impact as his debut, and slowly it felt like the beefs were the main show while the music was in the background. This change had a much bigger effect on rap as a whole. Other artists saw that going viral with drama or beef could boost their careers more than focusing on the art itself. Sadly, the culture started leaning more towards spectacle than skill. Napster music piracy ruined album sales. In the late 1990s, rap was one of the biggest selling genres in the world. CDs were flying off shelves, and artists like Jay-Z, Eminem, and Outkast were moving millions of copies with every release. Then, Napster came along in 1999 and completely flipped everything. For the first time, people could sit at their computers and download whole albums for free instead of paying for them. Fans thought it was amazing, but for the artists and record labels, it was a disaster. Overnight, album sales dropped because people weren't buying CDs anymore. This hit rappers really hard, since the rap audience was young and quick to jump on new technology. Suddenly, instead of paying $15 for a CD, fans could just get the songs they wanted at no cost. Rappers who once relied on platinum sales to prove their success were watching their numbers collapse. Labels started losing money, and smaller artists had an even harder time making a living. The whole business model for rap, which had been built on selling physical albums, no longer worked. Even when the music industry tried to shut Napster down through lawsuits, the damage had already been done. Other file-sharing sites like LimeWire and Kazaa popped up, and piracy became normal. Once fans got used to free downloads, paying for albums seemed old-fashioned. Because of this, rappers had to change how they operated. Mixtapes became the new way to reach fans, especially when artists realized they could give away music for free to build a buzz. DatPiff and other mixtape platforms became the new stages for rappers, and people like Lil Wayne and 50 Cent used them to stay hot. The collapse of album sales also pushed the industry towards streaming years later, but in the early 2000s, it was pure chaos, the shiny suit era. In the late 1990s, rap suddenly looked different. Instead of dark beats, hard rhymes, and street stories, You saw rappers wearing bright, shiny suits in music videos that looked more like fashion commercials. Puff Daddy, later called Diddy, was the leader of this style. He had flashy videos on MTV, songs that played in every club, and dances that looked like they belonged on a pop stage. It made rap bigger than ever before, and kids who had never listened to hip-hop were now dancing to it at parties. But at the same time, older fans and critics felt something was being lost. They said the raw vibe, truth-telling, and street feel that made rap powerful were being replaced by glitter, money, and image. But the thing is, this change didn't happen out of nowhere. Just a few years before, rap was dominated by groups like Wu-Tang Clan and Mobb Deep, who gave the world gritty stories of New York streets. Nas had dropped Illmatic, which was celebrated as one of the best rap albums ever because of how real it felt. But when Biggie died and the East versus West beef cooled down, things changed. Puff Daddy and Bad Boy Records took over, and they gave the world fun, radio-friendly tracks like Mo Money Mo Problems, with shiny suits and huge dance numbers. These videos cost millions to make, and rap was no longer about the hood. It was about luxury cars, champagne, and expensive outfits. The industry pushed it hard because it sold, but to many people, it looked like rap was being watered down. Even though the shiny suit era didn't last very long, the impact stayed. On one hand, it proved rap could dominate pop culture and cross into the mainstream. On the other hand, though, it showed that chasing money and looks could change the entire direction of the culture. By the early 2000s, rappers like DMX, Jay-Z, and others took the sound to something a lot better. But the shiny suit years were never forgotten. DMX's career got cut short. When DMX joined the rap industry in 1998, he felt like the total opposite of what was popular at the time. While Puffy was dancing in shiny suits, DMX was yelling into mics with a raw voice that sounded like it carried every single pain he had ever lived through. His first album, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, was an instant hit, going straight to #1. Just months later, he dropped another album, Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood, and that also went #1. No one had seen a rapper rise that fast before. Fans loved that he wasn't trying to look pretty or glamorous. He simply gave them pure energy, honesty, and emotion. By the late 90s, he was packing arenas, selling millions, and giving Def Jam one of its biggest stars ever. He should have been the king of the 2000s, but DMX's personal life kept pulling him down. His addiction to drugs was something he struggled with for decades, and fame only made it worse. While he should have been focused on music, he kept getting arrested for drugs, driving offenses, animal charges, and other legal issues. Each time he seemed ready to take the next step in his career, another arrest would stop the momentum. The headlines started to focus more on his court appearances than his music, and the industry got tired of dealing with the chaos. Even when he wanted to record, the consistency wasn't there because he was battling his demons off the mic. By the time new stars like Eminem and 50 Cent came in, DMX's shine had already started to fade, even though fans still craved his energy. The business side didn't help either. His relationship with Def Jam got really bad, and label drama made it harder to release music. He tried to come back several times, but the problems never really stopped. What made it worse was that people could see his potential. He was one of the only rappers who could drop multiple albums in a year and sell millions each time. But instead of building a long reign, his run was cut short by addiction, arrests, and bad management. Fans never forgot him, though. His early albums are still classics, and the way he could make a whole crowd yell along with him showed how much he connected with people. The start of the auto-tune backlash. In the mid-2000s, rap and R&B suddenly had a brand new sound, and it came from a computer tool called auto-tune. At first, auto-tune was just supposed to correct a singer's pitch, But T-Pain turned it into an actual style. With hits like Buy You a Drink and Bartender, that new twist to his usual voice took over the radio. People loved how different it sounded, and suddenly every club was blasting songs filled with that computerized effect. Rappers who couldn't sing before were now crooning on hooks, and even superstars like Lil Wayne and Kanye West started using it. It looked like auto-tune was the future, and for a while, things were going really well with it, but then came the backlash. Fans started saying it was being used too much, that it was covering up weak voices instead of adding to the music. Instead of showing talent, people thought it was hiding the lack of it. Jay-Z even released a song called DOA, Death of Autotune, in 2009, directly attacking the trend. Suddenly, rappers and singers had to defend themselves, saying they weren't relying on auto-tune as a crutch. Critics said rap was losing its rawness, and fans started demanding real vocals again. Overnight, what had been the hottest sound in music became something people mocked or dismissed as fake. T-Pain himself admitted years later that the backlash nearly destroyed him. He went from being everywhere on the radio to being blamed for ruining rap's sound. Even though artists like Future and Travis Scott later brought auto-tune back in new ways, the damage had already been done. That late 2000s period showed how one tool could take over the culture, but also how quickly fans could turn on it when they felt it was being abused. To this day, rappers using auto-tune still get asked the same question. Are they being creative, or are they just hiding their real voice behind effects? SoundCloud rappers rise and fall. In the mid-2000s, a new generation of rappers skipped record labels, radio, and traditional music rules. They uploaded their tracks straight onto SoundCloud, which was a free streaming site, and built massive fan bases online. These weren't perfectly polished songs with expensive videos. They were often recorded in their bedrooms, filled with distortion, and full of unedited emotion. Rappers like XXXTentacion, Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, Ski Mask the Slump God, and many others connected with millions of young listeners who felt ignored by mainstream rap. Their lyrics spoke about depression, addiction, heartbreak, and the dark side of growing up. And suddenly, they became the voices of a new generation. The energy was new, rebellious, and unpredictable, almost like punk rock and rap. But the movement had a very dark shadow hanging over it. Many of these rappers lived the same troubled lives they rapped about, and drugs were a major part of their lives. Lil Peep died of an overdose in 2017 at just 21. XXXTentacion was shot and killed in 2018 at only 20. Then there was Juice WRLD, who overdosed in 2019 right after landing at an airport, just 21 years old. In just 3 years, the biggest names of the SoundCloud wave were gone. The deaths left fans devastated and made the whole movement feel cursed. What should have been the start of a new era in rap instead turned into a series of tragedies that stopped it in its tracks. The fall of SoundCloud rap ended up showing just how fragile the music industry could be when artists rise too fast without support systems. It had all the potential to change rap forever, bringing in raw emotion and new sounds, but instead, it became known for young stars dying too soon. Today, rappers like Trippie Redd and Ski Mask still have bits of that SoundCloud style, but it has already lost its leaders. Which of these famous mistakes do you think could have been prevented from happening? If you enjoyed this video, then hit the like button and share it with everyone you know who would love to see it. If you'd like more videos like this, then subscribe to our channel and hit the notification icon so you don't miss our next videos.